Previously at Lorenzo's Fast Flow.
Today we're working on 396 for Chris at No Nonsense No How. He had a broken block where the starter mounts. There was only half a bolt hole left. So I filled it all in with a nickel bronze rod, which really sticks to cast iron. After I welded it, I drilled it for an insert so it would be stronger. I centered off of the part of the hole that was there, then I countersunk it with a 3/8 end mill, and then I drilled it straight through to the drill size for 3/8 16. After we got all that done, it was time to see if we could fix the bores, keeping it the same size because it was already bored 30/0 to 4.125. Lucky for us, whoever bored and honed it last time had them about 1/1000 to 2,000 small. So we were able to take the taper out of the bores and make them the right size, and it took all the wear marks out of the bore. While we're finishing up, Marco is working on the cylinder heads.
We were putting bronze liners in no-nonsense, big block, closed chamber heads. A lot of people will hammer it in flush with the guide on top. I personally leave it a ½ inch out on the top. Whatever it comes out on the bottom, cut it off on both ends so the tapered end is completely cut off, because sometimes it's harder to hone with the tapered end in the guide. I use ball broaches which wedge out the liner to a size. Then I use a diamond hone to hone it out so you know that the guide is perfectly straight, and you'll know how much clearance that you have using pilots for the exact size that you want.
We did the valve job with an 88% throat diameter, and we increased the valve size to a high performance Chevy rectangular port intake valve diameter. So there was a fair amount of material removed during the valve job, and it makes it so I can shape the bowl correctly because the heads originally did not have enough material under the valve, so the low lift numbers were horrible. So it was a fair amount of grinding, but the heads came out fantastic. We're flowing plenty of air to make the power levels that Chris is looking for. Now it's going to go over to the assembly room, and we'll get the rest of the pieces ready, and we'll start assembly, and I'm excited about it. I can't wait to get it on the dyno. fair amount of back and forth with this 396 engine for Chris, but I'm really happy with the results, and I can't wait to see it in the car and see how it performs. But he's gonna have a lot of fun with this thing. He'll probably burn the tires off it.
And now, Lorenzo answers your questions. When fixing the starter bolt, why not TIG weld?
You can't really TIG weld cast iron. If you're just doing like a little nick or something, I'll use a TIG torch. But the TIG torch doesn't work real well when you're using bronze. And I did that with a bronze material.
They always bore over, but why do you think the last guy bored it under?
The bores were bored oversized, but when he honed it, he didn't hone it as much as he should have. He left it about 1/1000th undersize, and one of the reasons could be that before you finish hone, you have to let the block fully cool to room temperature. And if he got the block too hot when he was honing and he didn't go back to it when it was cold, it'll shrink down. The bore size will shrink down. I let most blocks sit for at least 3 hours before completely finish it, because you'll go out to the size you want, and then when it returns to room temperature, it'll be almost 1/1000th, a half to 1/1000th undersized.
How much effect will hand porting have on the horsepower?
The effect of hand porting on the horsepower is the sky is the limit. When you put larger valves in these oval port heads, it creates it so you have a lot of material under the valve, so you can make it exactly how you need to make it to flow air. You could try to get as much airflow as you can by hand porting. It's a lot of testing and grinding and filling and changing angles on valve jobs and throats, and it's unlimited.
Were these OEM heads?
These were OEM heads. They were closed chamber, early 60s cylinder heads. I believe the ones we used on his were 1965, first year for the big block, closed chamber heads.
Nice work. Do y'all zero or at least square the deck on a build like this?
This deck we did because compression is tough to get in a 396 with the pistons that are offered.
Is that shellac or gasket former that you're brushing onto the intake bolts? Just curious, why should I start doing that?
Any of the intake bolts that go through to the water jackets, which is all Chevy blocks, a lot of different Chryslers, the lower bolt holes on small block Fords go through to the water jackets. So whenever they do, we use an anaerobic sealer, which is a non-hardening sealer. Used to be called Permatex 300. Now you can get it under Permatex Aviation. It's like a brown tar. You need to wipe that on the threads, or else water will wick up the threads and get in the oil.
No break-in goo on the lifters?
We always put the engines together with assembly lube. So we put assembly lube on the cam and on the face of the lifters. A lot of that will drip off. You have to make sure when you start it, you make it so it's ready to run for a half an hour. So we turn the key, we start it, we bring it right to 1800 RPM so that none of that assembly lube stays wicking around the cam. If you shut it off, a lot of it drips off when it gets hot.
I'm guessing the compression on this is high?
No, the compression is 9.7 to 1, so you could still use 93 octane pump gas. I don't use higher than 9.7 to 1 with iron heads. With aluminum heads, I can go all the way up to 11 to 1.
What brand of torque wrench is that? Do you have to get it calibrated every year?
We have multiple torque wrenches. We do send them every so often to get calibrated, not once a year. Generally, we use the Snap-on digital torque wrench. But I have multiple torque wrenches, and we check them against each other periodically also.
New KB pistons. And what rods were they?
They were SCAT I-beam connecting rods. They're 4340 material, and they have ARP cap screw bolts, and they're full floating ends.
What oil do you recommend after break-in?
In the summertime, I would run 2050 in it. Also, 1540 is fine. just like a heavy duty diesel oil, but you have to put the zinc additive in. I used a Lucas cam break-in additive, which gives it plenty of zinc. After the cam is broken in, during break-in we used a full pint of the additive. On oil changes, we only use half of the container of additive.